The royal halls have long held their share of secrets, but nothing could have prepared Princess Anne and young Prince George for what they found hidden in Queen Camilla's private bedroom. What began as an innocent visit quickly became a startling discovery, one that has shaken both the monarchy and the public. Was it a misplaced heirloom, a cryptic message, or something more controversial? One thing is certain, this finding has the potential to alter everything previously believed about Queen Camilla's role in the royal legacy. The truth can no longer be kept in the shadows. With the monarch's approval, Prince Charles's wife, Camilla, now bears the title Queen Consort. A seemingly ordinary walk through Clarence House in early May 2025 unexpectedly turned into a moment that may challenge the foundation of the British monarchy. Discussions about streamlining the royal family have grown louder, with advocates pushing for fewer senior royals, simplified responsibilities, and a more polished public image. Despite this, Princess Anne, a steadfast supporter of tradition, has opposed such reforms. She firmly believes each royal has a vital part in upholding the monarchy's legacy. However, behind palace doors, a deeply unsettling truth was quietly uncovered. During what should have been a routine visit to Queen Camilla's rooms, Princess Anne and young Prince George stumbled upon something completely unexpected. They weren't searching for secrets or being intrusive. Yet, upon entering Camilla's bedroom, they discovered something in a drawer that stopped them in their tracks, a carefully folded but aged handwritten letter from Frances Shan Kidd, Princess Diana's mother. This was no ordinary piece of correspondence, it was deeply personal, emotionally charged, and filled with revelations never before made public. The letter recounted Diana's final months within the royal family, her heartbreak, loneliness, and a growing sense of isolation behind palace walls. Though adored by the public, Diana, as described by Frances, endured silent suffering and emotional abandonment. The biggest mystery is how this private, poignant letter ended up in Queen Camilla's possession. Was it kept as a painful keepsake? Was it deliberately hidden or simply forgotten? Regardless of the reason, the discovery is explosive, especially given Camilla's long-standing efforts to reshape her public persona and move beyond past controversies. This revelation threatens to drag her back into one of the royal family's most painful chapters. For Prince George, the monarchy's future, this wasn't just a surprise, it was a moment of reckoning. As the younger generation observes today's actions, they quietly gather lessons for tomorrow. For Princess Anne, who has consistently upheld the values and unity of the crown, this letter raised profound questions, even challenging loyalties thought to be unshakable. To understand the weight of this letter, one must also understand Frances Shan Kidd, not just as Diana's mother, but as a woman shaped by aristocratic tradition and deep personal sorrow. Though her relationship with Diana had its struggles, the letter read like a final confession, perhaps a last attempt at emotional closure. But what pain did Frances Shan Kidd carry from the palace corridors to her personal grief? To uncover the truth behind the letter and the emotions it contains, we must first examine the life of the woman who wrote it. Born into privilege at Park House on the Sandringham estate on January 20, 1936, Frances grew up in close proximity to the royal circle. Her mother, Ruth Roche, served as lady-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, while her father, Maurice Roche, 4th Baron Fermoy, was a personal confidant of King George V. Frances wasn't merely observing royal life, she was raised at its very heart. Known from childhood as the Honorable, she was taught the art of graciousness, soft-spoken poise, and the importance of keeping private matters out of public view. Yet behind the polished appearance and formal upbringing was a young woman burdened by a life she hadn't chosen. At just 18, Frances made headlines when she married John Spencer, Viscount Althorp, on June 1, 1954, at Westminster Abbey. The wedding, attended by Queen Elizabeth II, was hailed as a grand union between a noble beauty and a future earl, solidifying Frances's position in one of Britain's most prestigious families. She became the youngest bride to wed in the Abbey in 50 years, stepping into a glamorous yet demanding role. Outwardly, Frances had everything: privilege, social standing, and a path toward becoming Countess Spencer. But behind the scenes, she felt constrained by strict expectations and emotional coldness. Everything changed in 1966 when she met Peter Shan Kidd, a wealthy Australian wallpaper tycoon. The royal halls have long held their share of secrets, but nothing could have prepared Princess Anne and young Prince George for what they found hidden in Queen Camilla's private bedroom. What began as an innocent visit quickly became a startling discovery, one that has shaken both the monarchy and the public. Was it a misplaced heirloom, a cryptic message, or something more controversial? One thing is certain, this finding has the potential to alter everything previously believed about Queen Camilla's role in the royal legacy. The truth can no longer be kept in the shadows. With the monarch's approval, Prince Charles's wife, Camilla, now bears the title Queen Consort. A seemingly ordinary walk through Clarence House in early May 2025 unexpectedly turned into a moment that may challenge the foundation of the British monarchy. Discussions about streamlining the royal family have grown louder, with advocates pushing for fewer senior royals, simplified responsibilities, and a more polished public image. Despite this, Princess Anne, a steadfast supporter of tradition, has opposed such reforms. She firmly believes each royal has a vital part in upholding the monarchy's legacy. However, behind palace doors, a deeply unsettling truth was quietly uncovered. During what should have been a routine visit to Queen Camilla's rooms, Princess Anne and young Prince George stumbled upon something completely unexpected. They weren't searching for secrets or being intrusive. Yet, upon entering Camilla's bedroom, they discovered something in a drawer that stopped them in their tracks, a carefully folded but aged handwritten letter from Frances Shan Kidd, Princess Diana's mother. This was no ordinary piece of correspondence, it was deeply personal, emotionally charged, and filled with revelations never before made public. The letter recounted Diana's final months within the royal family, her heartbreak, loneliness, and a growing sense of isolation behind palace walls. Though adored by the public, Diana, as described by Frances, endured silent suffering and emotional abandonment. The biggest mystery is how this private, poignant letter ended up in Queen Camilla's possession. Was it kept as a painful keepsake? Was it deliberately hidden or simply forgotten? Regardless of the reason, the discovery is explosive, especially given Camilla's long-standing efforts to reshape her public persona and move beyond past controversies. This revelation threatens to drag her back into one of the royal family's most painful chapters. He was charming, worldly, and unlike anyone she had ever known. Their connection was immediate and intoxicating. In 1967, Frances made a bold and controversial move. She left her husband and filed for divorce, shattering the carefully maintained image of the dutiful aristocratic wife. At a time when divorce among the upper class was still deeply frowned upon, her actions drew intense public attention and disapproval. With 4 young children, including Diana, the media and public turned their gaze to Frances, not with compassion, but with criticism. The bitter custody battle that followed offered no sense of liberation. Instead, it exposed her private grief to the nation and left deep wounds that would affect both her and her children for years. It became a wound that never truly healed. The fallout from Frances Shan Kidd's rebellion went far beyond scandal or media frenzy. It struck at the emotional core of her family. When she walked away from the Spencer family home in 1967, she believed she was freeing herself from an oppressive life. What she didn't foresee was how profoundly her decision would shatter her daughter Diana's world. That sense of betrayal became painfully clear during a dramatic custody case in 1969. In a stunning turn of events, Frances's own mother, Ruth Roche, Lady Fermoy, testified against her, insisting that John Spencer was the more stable and suitable parent. What had already been a painful family divide became a public courtroom drama. Tension filled the air as betrayal echoed louder than the judge's gavel. The ruling favored John Spencer, granting him full custody of Sarah, Jane, Charles, and Diana. Frances lost not only her marriage and social standing but also her children. For 6-year-old Diana, it was a bewildering heartbreak. One moment her mother was lovingly putting her to bed, and the next, she was gone, without warning, without an explanation a child could understand. That absence left a lasting mark on Diana's life. The emotional scar followed her into adulthood, affecting her relationships, mental health, and self-esteem. She would later admit to friends that it felt like her mother abandoned her publicly. Although Diana earned the adoration of the world as the people's princess, she struggled behind the scenes to feel truly loved. While she cherished her father, she yearned for her mother's affection, something she felt had been taken from her. Whenever Frances reappeared in her life, the air was heavy with unspoken pain. Love, resentment, and sadness coexisted in every interaction. Diana longed for connection, but the gap created by years apart was never truly bridged. Another emotional blow came in 1976 when John Spencer married Reine, Countess of Dartmouth, a glamorous, sharp-tongued woman and the daughter of romantic novelist Barbara Cartland. As a teenager, Diana fiercely clashed with her new stepmother. She famously referred to her as Acid Reine, a reflection of her bitterness and sense of alienation. This new figure in her father's home only deepened Diana's feelings of displacement. What was once her sanctuary now felt unfamiliar and cold. Meanwhile, Frances's second marriage was unraveling. By 1988, her relationship with Peter Shan-Kidd had broken down. He eventually returned to his former wife, leaving Frances once again alone. She had given up everything in the name of love, only to be left behind once more. But life had one more twist. In February 1981, her daughter Diana, then just 19, became engaged to Prince Charles, heir to the British throne. In an instant, Frances found herself thrust back into the limelight she had long tried to escape. The aristocracy that had once turned its back on her now looked to her anew, as the mother of the future Queen of England. It was a strange, ironic form of vindication, cloaked in emotional distance. For Frances, it was almost unreal. The daughter she had lost to court decisions and societal norms was now preparing to take her place within the very system that had once rejected them both. Yet behind the romantic fairy tale shown to the world, the reality remained complicated. The severed bond between mother and daughter never fully mended. Although Frances was present at Diana's royal wedding on July 29, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral, seated among dignitaries and royalty, her role felt more like that of a guest than a mother. She watched from afar as Diana stepped into a life of royal duties and immense pressure. As Diana's marriage began to unravel, Frances saw unsettling similarities to her own past, an emotional void in the arms of a distant spouse. Diana bore the immense pressure of public expectation and the loneliness of royal life. But unlike her mother, Frances, she didn't turn away from it. She stayed, not for herself, but for her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, and for the hope that things might improve. I don't always read that. She once began, perhaps alluding to the emotional storms she faced. While Diana navigated those challenges, Frances remained distant. Their interactions were rare, their relationship weakened by years of silence, emotional wounds, and conflicting decisions. In 1997, after Diana's high-profile divorce from Prince Charles, Frances gave an interview to Hello magazine. In it, she said that Diana felt relieved to relinquish her title of Her Royal Highness. But instead of feeling seen, Diana felt deeply betrayed. That one remark fractured the already delicate bond they had left. Hurt and angry, Diana never spoke to her mother again. Their silence endured, unresolved, until fate intervened. On August 31, 1997, Diana died in a tragic car crash in Paris. The grief that followed was profound. For Frances, the pain was sharpened by regret. There had been no final conversation, no healing, only silence. Gripped by sorrow and remorse, Frances released a handwritten note to the public, expressing gratitude for the nation's support. In trembling but graceful words, she wrote, "With pride, love and admiration I return her to him so that she may rest in peace." As whispers faded around Frances's final farewell, a new stir began quietly in the royal sphere, one not tied to the past, but to the evolving present. It began with an unremarkable lunch at Clarence House. Princess Anne, known for her clarity and commitment, arrived with quiet urgency. Though fiercely loyal to her brother, King Charles III, and had started noticing unsettling changes, Camilla's rising influence, her increasingly private behavior, and growing concerns about Charles's health, rumors whispered but never confirmed. The king had gradually withdrawn from many public roles, citing exhaustion. In his absence, Camilla had become more prominent, more decisive, and perhaps, more powerful. To the public, it appeared to be a natural evolution. But Anne, having witnessed many palace shifts over the years, knew when something felt wrong. When Queen Camilla began canceling appearances due to fatigue, Anne's concern deepened. She didn't place trust easily, and she certainly didn't leave royal matters to chance. One cool spring Saturday at Windsor, Anne made a bold decision. She paid an unannounced visit to Camilla's private quarters. She wasn't alone. Prince George, just 11, accompanied her. He had been spending the weekend with Anne, and an unlikely closeness had formed. George, mature beyond his years, appreciated Anne's honesty. She, in turn, saw in him a future king who might one day need to understand truths left out of official records. Camilla's rooms were unusually quiet. The normally open and welcoming space now felt sealed and secretive. Heavy curtains blocked out the light, and locked doors heightened the strangeness. A hesitant chambermaid, gently urged by Anne, revealed that Queen Camilla had left that morning for Raymell House, her private Wiltshire estate, without her usual staff. This surprised Anne. Though Raymell had long been Camilla's personal refuge, her sudden and unannounced departure felt uncharacteristic. The silence at Clarence House wasn't simply strange, it felt deliberate. Especially in Camilla's area, the atmosphere seemed engineered. Anne and George exchanged a knowing glance. They sensed something was unfolding, something larger than a mere absence. The palace was still, but there was tension in the air, as if holding a secret. Whatever lay behind Camilla's vacated space was waiting to be found, and what Anne and George were about to uncover would send shockwaves through the quiet halls. As they entered Camilla's deserted suite, Anne's instincts sharpened. Something was clearly off. The quiet wasn't natural, it was calculated. The room, untouched and emotionless, lacked any sign of daily life. No fresh flowers brightened the space. No teacup sat abandoned on a sill. Only a faint trace of lavender lingered, like a scent from the past. Determined to get answers, Anne summoned the palace steward and, with calm authority, requested the master key. As the king's sister, second-born, but always decisive, she unlocked the door herself. With George following closely, his young eyes absorbing everything, they stepped inside. Though inexperienced, he could tell something wasn't right. The room was theatrically still, the curtains tightly drawn, the light barely seeping through. Then, behind a worn dressing screen in the corner, George noticed something. A large, aged trunk sat tucked away, its brass clasp tarnished, its wooden surface dark with time. Dust coated the lid, but an inscription remained just visible. He leaned closer, his voice soft with realization, "D.S. Diana Spencer," and froze. "George, step back," she instructed gently but firmly. Moving with care, she took a pair of lace gloves from Camilla's vanity, then approached the trunk. With a quiet creak, the lid opened, and time seemed to pause. Inside were deeply personal treasures, preserved as if untouched since 1997, handwritten letters in Diana's flowing script, private journals filled with thoughts too intimate for public eyes, black and white photos capturing candid, heartfelt moments, laughing with her sons, gazing through palace windows, walking alone in quiet reflection. A life once lived, rediscovered in silence. There were mementos as well, delicate tokens like a ballet program scribbled with notes in the margins, a flower carefully pressed between pages of a book, and a tiny music box that still played a soft lullaby when opened. Anne reached into the chest and gently pulled out an envelope, its edges yellowed with age, still sealed with a wax crest. She didn't open it, not yet. George remained silent, instinctively grasping that this discovery was more than just a glimpse into the past, it was a concealed piece of his family's history, never meant to surface in Camilla's quarters. The room seemed to hum with the weight of secrets. And stood frozen, the atmosphere thick with unspoken stories and long-buried questions. George, just a few steps behind, watched her intently, trying to decode the torrent of emotions hidden behind her composed expression. Among the neatly arranged letters, one was set slightly apart. Its hurried, uneven fold gave it an urgent presence. George reached for it gently. The handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to Princess Diana. The letter began, "To my sons, in case anything ever happens to me." A chill passed through them as they realized this was not an ordinary message. It was a warning veiled in tenderness, a desperate attempt to leave behind a truth only time could deliver. And read further and uncovered another note. It read, "Pleasure of sitting next to you before, and I thought perhaps you decided that as you knew what is in store you decided to go elsewhere." The date revealed it had been written just months before Diana's fatal crash in Paris in August 1997. Written in bold crimson ink, the letter, addressed to Queen Elizabeth II, stood out for both its tone and content. It was deeply personal yet edged with anxiety. Diana spoke of feeling surveilled, of strange clicks on her phone, of an unseen presence that followed her. She expressed fears that she might not live long enough to see William and Harry become men. Her words trembled with both longing and fear. Anne's grip tightened. If these letters were authentic, if they truly captured Diana's final private thoughts, how had they ended up hidden in Camilla's private room? There were no archival markings, no official seals, no protective sleeves, just vulnerable pieces of a woman's pain left unguarded. That made the discovery even more unsettling. The possibilities were limited and disturbing. Could Camilla have taken them during the confusion after Diana's death, when her belongings were swiftly cleared from Kensington Palace amid national mourning and unanswered questions? Or worse, had someone close to Diana willingly passed them on, perhaps even Charles? The idea left and unsettled. If Charles, weighed down by guilt and a longing to reconcile with the past, had given them to Camilla so she could better understand Diana, then it had been a grave mistake. These letters were not his to give. They belonged to Diana's sons, to her mother-in-law. Their intimate content made handing them over a step too far. And if Camilla had intended to preserve them, why hide them in a locked, forgotten room instead of entrusting them to royal archivists? Why stash them away in silence, only to abandon them without explanation? And turned to George and spoke in a low voice. These weren't meant to be lost. But even as she said it, the question lingered sharply in the air. Who had betrayed Diana again? And what exactly had Anne and George uncovered in Queen Camilla's hidden room? The truth, it seemed, could be even more unsettling than they imagined. The silence in the room felt almost sentient, as if the walls themselves were listening. Anne reached once more into the chest and brushed her fingers against a worn manila envelope, tightly sealed. The label stamped in faded black ink read, "Private. Do not open. Eyes only." Her heart thudded with anticipation as she quietly broke the seal. George, now at her side, watched with wide eyes, the weight of legacy beginning to settle over his young shoulders. Inside were photographs the public had never seen. There were candid shots of Diana laughing with William and Harry in the gardens of Highgrove, barefoot and full of light. But one image made Anne's hands tremble. It was taken just weeks before Diana's death in Paris. She stood alone in a corridor at Clarence's house, her face devoid of joy, her eyes distant and hollow. Beside her, partly cut out of the frame, stood another woman, her arm unmistakably bearing the gold bracelet Camilla had worn for years. Anne froze. What was Camilla doing there? Had they met secretly? What had passed between them, if anything? She looked at George, whose face had gone pale. "Why would Queen Camilla keep these?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. And had no answer. No one in the palace did. That same day, the uneasy quiet that had descended on Windsor shattered. News reached King Charles, and Camilla was discreetly summoned. There was no official announcement, no public apology, just a storm of tension behind closed doors. Insiders spoke of a heated confrontation between Anne and her brother. She demanded to know why these intimate artifacts had been hidden away for so long. Camilla, visibly shaken, reportedly said, "I kept them out of fear. I didn't take them to hurt anyone. I just wanted to understand her. To find peace." Perhaps that was true. But to Anne, and likely to others, it felt less like reconciliation and more like control. And that, too, had crossed a sacred line. Prince William, visibly shaken, ordered that everything be returned to Diana's estate. Harry, told by and from afar, made no public comment, but his silence said enough. Predictably, the press erupted. Headlines blared, "Diana's secret diaries found in Camilla's room" and "Princess and uncovers royal secrets." Public reaction was immediate and intense. Old doubts about Camilla's role in Diana's life and death surged back to the surface. Sympathy poured out anew for Diana, the woman still known to many as the People's Princess. Her fears, her thoughts, and her private anguish had been unearthed. What she once locked away in letters now echoed throughout the palace corridors. And, ever resolute, knew this couldn't be buried again. Quiet plans began to take shape. With William's consent, some of Diana's letters might one day be made public. The world, she believed, deserved to hear Diana's voice once more. Through it all, one truth became undeniable: the past had not vanished, it had merely been hidden, waiting to be uncovered by a young heir and his great-aunt when they opened a chest that refused to remain shut. But one question still lingered: what else had Queen Camilla concealed within that locked chest? And why had that final photograph of her and Diana remained in the shadows for so long? We'd love to know your thoughts. Don't forget to comment below and subscribe.